Let me close with a thought that may feel uncomfortable at first, a thought that challenges how most people understand power and politics in the modern world. The question sounds simple when you first hear it, but the deeper you think about it, the more complicated it becomes. Why does the United States seem to need the idea of the Iranian threat? Before reacting emotionally to that question, it is important to slow down and examine the pattern behind it. Once a person begins to recognize this pattern, it becomes almost impossible to ignore. It changes the way news is interpreted. It changes the way political speeches are understood. It even changes the way war, diplomacy, and national identity are viewed. Throughout history, republics have rarely functioned well in complete comfort. They have often required a certain level of tension in order to stay cohesive. When societies become too comfortable and face no external pressure, internal disagreements often intensify. Political energy that might have been directed outward begins to turn inward. Instead of unity, there is fragmentation. Instead of a shared sense of direction, people begin to divide into competing groups with different visions for the future. This idea is not new. Ancient civilizations recognized it long before the modern world existed. Greek thinkers often observed that states tended to unite when they faced external dangers, but struggled with internal divisions during times of peace. The Romans understood something similar. Their republic and later their empire frequently maintained unity through the presence of frontier challenges and rival powers. External pressure created a sense of shared purpose. In the context of modern history, the United States experienced something similar during the 20th century. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union was not only seen as a geopolitical rival, but also as a symbol of a competing world view. The conflict between the two superpowers was framed as a struggle between opposing systems: capitalism versus communism, democracy versus authoritarian rule, and individual freedoms versus state control. Because of that contrast, many Americans felt they had a clear sense of what their country represented. Leaders could speak about national values with strong conviction because those values were constantly being compared to an opposing system. The rivalry created a powerful narrative. Citizens felt connected to a larger mission, and political disagreements were often set aside in the name of national unity. Government institutions also operated differently during that period. Major national projects were supported across political lines because the external rivalry made cooperation seem necessary. Military spending was widely accepted, and technological competition, such as the space race, became a symbol of national pride. The presence of a powerful rival helped organize American political life. When the Cold War ended in the early 1990s, many people believed that a new era of global stability had arrived. The collapse of the Soviet Union appeared to remove the primary geopolitical rival that had shaped world politics for decades. There was widespread optimism that ideological conflicts might gradually fade and that democratic systems would spread across the globe. However, the decades that followed did not unfold as simply as many had hoped. Instead of a long period of unity and shared purpose, many Western societies experienced increasing internal polarization. Political debates became sharper, cultural disagreements intensified, the absence of a single external rival sometimes made it harder to maintain a shared national narrative. Without a clear external focus, political energy began to concentrate more heavily on internal issues. Public debates became more fragmented, and citizens often felt divided into opposing camps on cultural, social, and economic questions. The sense of a unified national mission became more difficult to sustain. History shows that removing external pressure does not always lead to harmony. In many cases, societies that no longer face a major external challenge begin to focus more intensely on internal conflicts. Human communities tend to direct their energy somewhere, and when there is no external rival, that energy can turn inward. In modern discussions about global politics, Iran often appears as a significant point of tension in American political discourse. It is important to understand that when policymakers talk about Iran, they are often discussing more than the country itself. The conversation frequently takes on a symbolic dimension that reflects larger ideas about identity, influence, and global leadership. Iran is a regional power with influence in the Middle East, but it does not possess the same economic scale as major global economies or the same worldwide military reach as the largest superpowers. Despite this, it is frequently portrayed in political rhetoric as a serious strategic concern. That portrayal shapes how the public understands international events and how governments allocate attention and resources. In politics, perception often plays a powerful role. Public narratives about threats or rivals can influence behavior even when the objective balance of power is more complicated. Political leaders use narratives to communicate urgency, define priorities, and create a sense of direction for their societies. Historical leaders understood this dynamic as well. In ancient Rome, for example, political authority was often justified by emphasizing the dangers facing the empire's borders. Whether those dangers were large or small, the perception of ongoing challenges helped maintain support for strong central leadership and military readiness. When citizens believe their society faces significant external risks, they are more likely to accept policies related to defense, security, and national coordination. Governments throughout history have relied on this psychological dynamic. The presence of a perceived threat can unify populations that might otherwise focus primarily on their differences. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, the United States entered what became known as the War on Terror. The phrase itself is notable because it does not refer to a specific country or conventional army. Instead, it describes a broader struggle against networks and ideas associated with extremist violence. Because the concept of terrorism is not tied to a single geographic location, it created a long-term framework for national mobilization. Governments could justify new security measures, expanded intelligence operations, and international military missions under the banner of countering that threat. The narrative helped maintain a sense of urgency and unity in the aftermath of a traumatic event. Within that broader context, Iran often appeared in political discussions as a government openly critical of American influence in the Middle East. Iranian leaders frequently used strong rhetoric against the United States, and the country's regional alliances and nuclear ambitions drew significant international attention. These factors made Iran a recurring focal point in political speeches, policy debates, and media coverage. In the world of media and public communication, stories tend to revolve around clear conflicts. Dramatic narratives are easier to communicate and easier for audiences to understand. A political environment that includes identifiable rivals and moments of tension generates far more public engagement than one focused solely on technical policy discussions. When leaders speak about international challenges, they often frame their arguments around values and identity. They explain what their nation stands for by contrasting it with opposing ideas or systems. This process of defining identity through contrast has been present in many societies throughout history. Countries frequently develop narratives about themselves based on the principles they believe they represent. These narratives help citizens feel connected to a larger national story. When another country represents a very different political or ideological approach, the contrast can reinforce those narratives. In some ways, rivalries between states function like mirrors. Each side emphasizes the differences that make its own system appear more legitimate or more meaningful. The contrast clarifies identity on both sides. Even when tensions are real, the symbolic dimension of the rivalry can be just as powerful as the strategic one. However, full-scale war is rarely the desired outcome of such rivalries. Total conflict carries enormous costs and unpredictable consequences. In many cases, political systems operate within a space of ongoing tension that stops short of direct war. This allows governments to maintain narratives of vigilance and strength without risking catastrophic confrontation. A contained rivalry can serve multiple political purposes. It can justify defense spending, maintain alliances, and provide leaders with a clear story about global responsibility and national security. At the same time, avoiding direct war prevents the enormous human and economic costs that large-scale conflict would bring. If one rival disappears from the political narrative, another often emerges over time. Large political systems tend to organize themselves around contrasts and comparisons. New geopolitical competitors, ideological differences, or regional conflicts can fill the space that older rivalries once occupied. Some analysts argue that competition between major powers in the 21st century may increasingly involve countries with large economies and technological influence. At the same time, regional tensions in different parts of the world continue to shape global politics and media narratives. The deeper point behind these patterns is not necessarily about any single country. Instead, it relates to how large societies maintain cohesion and shared purpose across millions of people with diverse beliefs and interests. External challenges often provide a common reference point that helps unify public attention. This observation is not meant as a moral judgment, but rather as a reflection on historical patterns. Many political systems, from ancient republics to modern democracies, have relied on some form of external tension to maintain internal cohesion. The question that remains open is whether a society can sustain a strong sense of unity without relying on the presence of a rival. Can a nation build its identity purely around shared aspirations rather than opposition? History provides only limited examples of such long-term stability without some form of external comparison. Perhaps future political systems will discover new ways of building unity based on cooperation, global challenges, or shared human goals. Issues like climate change, technological transformation, and global health could potentially create common purposes that transcend traditional rivalries. For now, however, the pattern seen throughout history continues to shape international politics. Societies often define themselves through contrasts with others, and those contrasts influence how citizens interpret global events. Whether the focus is on regional powers, ideological differences, or emerging competitors, the structure of political storytelling tends to remain similar. Understanding this pattern can help people view political narratives with greater awareness. It encourages citizens to examine not only the events themselves, but also the larger frameworks through which those events are presented. By recognizing how identity, perception, and tension interact in politics, individuals can develop a deeper understanding of how modern power operates. In the end, the most important question is not simply which rival appears in the headlines today. The deeper question is whether humanity can eventually move beyond the need for constant opposition as the foundation of political unity. History has not yet given a clear answer, but the conversation itself is worth having.